Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I am recording an episode today on something that happened to me recently, and I'm going to share a personal story, and then I'm going to weave it into where and how you can use this if you are a parent listening. And if you're not a parent listening and you're just taking this information in, be it because you appreciate sort of the inner parenting aspect of it, um, feel free to share with me in an email or DM me on Instagram and let me know if it landed. But I'm going to talk about the value of what it means to really help the people around us feel seen. And I'm going to explain it in the context of this story, and I'm going to weave it into other examples so that you can think about where and how this shows up for you. So let me start with the story, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about empathy and really the value of being able to help someone in a moment of need feel seen. I think it is one of the most powerful traits you can have. I think it is like humanity at its finest sometimes when I see somebody holding space for another. I know for myself as a coach and as somebody who works with both parents and life coaching clients, it is the ultimate goal for me. I've sort of created my day to feel very spacious and steady so that I can hold that degree of space for the people that I work with because the ultimate sort of gesture of love, I believe, is when we allow the people in our orbit to feel seen. So let's start with the story, and I think you'll get a good understanding of sort of where I'm going. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe even longer than that, I was preparing to interview Dr. Elisha Goldstein. He was recently on the podcast, and we were talking about his book, Tiny Shifts, and it's all about emotional regulation for adults. And it also talks about emotional longevity, sort of what he describes it as, which is this idea that, we spend a lot of time in the health and fitness world and in the wellness space trying to sort of biohack longevity and what's the best way to live the longest life and the most optimal life and things like that. And those are usually followed by like exercises and weightlifting and the right amount of protein and all the things that, tends to sort of flood our feeds on social media. But his argument, and I completely agree with him, and that's why I was excited to have him on the show, is that the actual sort of missing point or the missing piece in a lot of these conversations is that our emotional well-being is actually the biggest indicator of a life well lived or what longevity looks like. I mean, I think even if you look at some other longevity studies, that what they see is that the people who tend to sort of maybe not live as long or not live as well of a life, they tend to sort of suffer from loneliness or social isolation. So it's so important to me that I had him on because along with emotionally regulating our kids, I think it's so important that we understand that for ourselves too. And in fact, we need to understand it for ourselves if our hope is to break that cycle. So in a nutshell, I was really, really excited and nervous to have him on because I really admire his work. He sort of has accomplished a lot of things that I find so impressive. And I was really wanting to make sure I made a good impression. And I did all the things and I was prepared and overly prepared. And I read the book and I had my notes and all the things that I typically will do before a podcast. And in particular, when it's a guest that I'm so, so excited about, like this, I really want to make sure I'm always dotting my I's, crossing my T's. And then most importantly is I wanted to really make sure that his work was properly communicated to you guys, the audience, that you were able to glean just as much from him as I have throughout the years. So all this to say, I was nervous, but I was also really excited. So it's the day of recording. My producer, John, was on the call too, or on the recording as well at the beginning. And he usually sets up the tech stuff and makes sure sound check goes well and that, everything's working out. And again, the podcast is pre-recorded, so it's not that it's live or anything like that. So usually I don't have a lot of sort of feelings around like something being said that shouldn't be said or making a mistake because in editing, like we can always go in and clean up things. Although I will say, John doesn't really tend to we don't need to edit too much. I tend to really want the conversations to feel very free flowing and not very edited. In fact, if you guys are listening to this right now, I want my solo episodes to feel like I am on a phone call with you. So I don't even edit these. I just clean up the audio because like currently at the moment, the landscapers at my neighbors are outside and it's very loud. So I take out any background sound, but I don't edit what I'm saying because I want it to feel very genuine and I want you guys to feel like we are having a chit chat together. So I'm on the podcast recording. Dr. Goldstein joins. I'm excited. I'm trying to sort of settle my nerves. I'm doing some of my breathing techniques. I'm, making sure my feet are planted on the ground. I'm really trying to steady myself so that I can really make sure that we have this great interview and that we can have this really nice organic conversation that feels free flowing and easy. I didn't want it to feel rigid and whatnot. So John gets us all squared away. Dr. Goldstein's very kind. Everything's going very well. We start the recording. John always jumps off and then says, text me if something comes up or if you need anything, which usually I never have. So we start recording, and out of nowhere, my computer is like, I can't even describe it other than it almost felt possessed. The fan starts to run like it is working overtime. Like I'm not even sure what's happening. There are no storms, there's no wind, nothing is happening in terms of our power, but suddenly I'm getting unstable internet notices constantly. And then I asked Dr. Goldstein this question about one of the things that he wrote about in his book, and it's one of my favorite topics. And I'm trying to focus on our conversation, but meanwhile, I'm just getting buzzed with all these different notifications that like I'm glitching. There are times when his screen is totally frozen and I can hear him, but I can't see him. Then there are other times where he completely cuts out and I have no idea what he said. So now I'm trying to understand, like, do I have him repeat it? Am I like, it's just not feeling like a conversation. And just for context, usually when I'm recording podcasts, I'm not even I'm not even thinking about anything else other than what I'm conversing about in that moment. And that was not happening, meaning like nothing about this conversation felt in flow. And it was just one tech issue after the other, a lot of glitchy things happening. So while he's sharing and while he's answering my questions, I am having like a complete dysregulatory nervous system shutdown. I'm sweating. I'm trying to calm my body down. I'm not sure what's recording and what's not. I'm not even sure if I'm asking him the right questions back because I didn't even fully hear what he said in the last answer. Everything about it feels like I am pushing a boulder uphill. But then that little voice in my head, that shameful part of me is like, don't tell him like you're having glitches. How embarrassing. He carved out this time for you. Make this work. You better show up and don't worry. The tech is fine. It's you. Like I was literally just having all these voices in my head saying that I needed to just keep going and keep going. And this would be so embarrassing to tell him that I'm seeing all these tech issues on my side and to pause and whatnot. So I'm like superseding my gut, which my gut is saying at the moment, oh my gosh, just say, hey, can we pause for a quick second? I'm having some tech issues. Let me bring John back on and let's see if we can resolve this. So what ends up happening is I sort of override that, which I never do. Usually I'm such a good, like checking in with my gut person, but it happens, right? We're human. So I'm pushing forward. It's so choppy. It's feeling awful. I don't even feel like myself. I feel like I'm completely blocked. And I'm hating it because at this point, we're like 30 minutes in. So I feel like I've already wasted his time if I go in and say something. So I ask him this question. He is sharing so poignantly. Like the answer he's giving is like, I'm literally just now starting to settle into my body and just take in his wisdom. And I get a notification that says, the recording has stopped. You're in completely, like almost like it was a dead zone. And he is talking and talking, and I cannot bring myself to interrupt him and say, I don't even know if this is recording. I don't know what's happening. So he finishes this beautiful, beautiful answer. And I now have no choice because I'm like, I don't think I'm even recording at this point. I don't even know what's happening. So I say to him, I am so sorry. I have to text John. I'm going to bring him back on. I'm getting all of these notifications. I feel so terrible. I can't tell you how embarrassed I am. It was funny because his book is all about like regulating yourself in these moments. And he has this 4R method. And I was like, kind of in light of things, I was like, if it makes you feel better, I'm literally using your 4R method on myself right now as all of these glitches are occurring. And we laughed about it. And John comes on, and right at that point when John comes on, so now I'm already like feeling so embarrassed. I'm not sure what's recorded. I'm not sure what John's going to say. I'm thinking John might come back and say like, oh my gosh, nothing sounds right. You guys got to start over. And at this point, I'm like, I don't know what his schedule looks like. Could he in theory stay on longer with me? How embarrassing. This isn't going to work out. Like all the things that come up. And again, I'm totally dysregulated. I'm still trying to just anchor myself, and I'm having a really hard time doing it. So by design, because I believe this is how the universe works, my computer completely shuts down. it completely shuts down. The screen blacks out. It's not even that it freezes, you guys. It totally shuts down. I've never seen it do this. And I can't see anything. I can't hear anything. I cannot access anything. Nothing's working. It's completely collapsed at this point. And I believe in my heart that it was the universe saying, you need to stop and get yourself grounded. You have to get centered again. You are not in your body right now, and you need to go back there. So I shut my computer. I literally just put the screen down on my laptop. I move away from my recording space, and my husband happened to be working from home that day, and I'm like, you are not going to believe what's happening. This is literally like my nightmare happening with this particular guest because I feel so bad and you have no idea what's going on. And he's a real steady person for me to go to. So he's like, hey, a lot of these things are out of your control. You did what you needed to do. I'm sure it's going to be okay. And he's saying all of this, but I'm kind of like, I don't even know. But in the process, and as I'm talking about it, I can feel my body starting to steady because that is one of the forms of grounding for me that helps, or one way that I calm myself is if I can talk to somebody. It does help me. So you have to choose the right person because we don't want to go to people who are going to get us more escalated. But if we can find somebody who's going to go like, oh gosh, you got this, and can help steady you in those moments, so helpful. So I get really calm. I completely surrender. And I'm like, all right, universe, if this is meant to be, so be it. If this completely blows up in my face and I've offended him and I've wasted his time, I will manage the fallout of that. Like I'm playing out every scenario, and I'm just reminding myself, I will be fine. I will be okay. I can solve any problem. I can work through this. Thank you for the opportunity, and just really going back into that space where I feel myself. And my computer comes back to life. I get back on, and John and Dr. Goldstein are like chatting it up and laughing and telling stories. And I'm like, I am so sorry. This has never happened. And my deepest apologies. And John sort of says, you lost some of the audio. There is some glitchiness happening, but the cloud was able to hold on to it. So I think I can recover it and I can put it back together wherever those glitches were, because there was this backup audio file that had basically been catching some of the things that where it was not, or where those moments of freezing were happening. I guess he was able to resolve that. So it did stop recording. So we did have to go back and redo some of the questions, or at least sort of revisit that part of the conversation. And now I'm saying to Dr. Goldstein, I said, I'm just apologizing. And I'm saying, I am so sorry. I just did not, I've never had this happen. And I don't know if you're able to stay on longer, if you have a hard stop at this time. I completely understand. I feel really bad because I feel like I've wasted your time. And now we have to go back and basically redo part of the episode, some of the pieces of audio that John couldn't save. And honestly, in that moment, he could have easily said to me, you know what? I don't have time. I'm really, I have another call in a minute, or this has been great, but I've got to get off. Like I'm foreseeing all these things. And he says to me, you know what, Albiona? He says, I also have a podcast. And he said, I was hosting an interview similar to this with somebody that I really admire. And we were talking and talking, and it was like the perfect interview, the perfect conversation. I could not wait for my audience to hear it. And I can't remember who he said the guest was, but it was just everything was going great. He goes, we were over an hour into the conversation. And he says to me, and I realized I never hit record. And that entire podcast was nothing. Not one piece of audio had been recorded. Not one part of that conversation, which, by the way, was so organic and free-flowing, would be really hard to replicate. Like, we were just in the flow and nothing was recorded because I did not hit record. And he said, when I realized it, I said to the guest, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. I never hit record. And he just kind of owns it. And the guest starts to laugh. And he says, don't worry, this has been such an awesome conversation. I've loved it so much, and I'm happy to keep talking to you. And so he goes, so I just went in at that point and I hit record, and we had a beautiful continued conversation that did get recorded, and all is well. He said, look, I do have a meeting at 2, but I'm going to move it because I really like talking to you, and let's keep going. And I could cry right now, even like reliving that moment, because in that moment, what he did for me, without probably even realizing it, is he used storytelling and his own personal experience to help me feel seen. He could have had a million other options. He could have even just expressed empathy kindly and said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Things happen. Yeah, we can keep recording." Like, even that would have been more than generous. But he went 10 steps beyond that and shared with me this incredibly hard moment that he too had that paralleled this one for me. And he connected these two moments so beautifully. To me, that is like compassion at its most potent level, right? Because he saw that I was nervous. He saw that I felt so bad. And at that same moment, he also understood that feeling and had similar experiences. And instead of letting me stew in it, he was like, "No, this is normal. Like, I've done that. And here's what I did. At least you had glitches. I like completely didn't hit record." And he used a story to help me feel seen. And it was a personal story. And because he chose to do it, he didn't have to do that. He chose to go the extra step and share that with me. I was so moved and I was so touched. And it was another reminder of the power of storytelling in the form of compassion and empathy. When we share parts of our story, we connect with the people around us because we all have stories. We all have this beautiful lived experience where one day we're on top of the world and everything feels amazing, and the next day we are falling apart. We all have stories. So let's look at that same notion, that same concept, that same space that Dr. Goldstein created for me, and let's apply that to parenting. So yes, you guys hear me say a lot, like it's really important that we can express empathy to our kids. And sometimes this is hard even in the context of like when I work with clients. So let's say your child does something that feels egregious or bad, or like, they know better, or they shouldn't do that behavior. It's very hard sometimes for a parent to tap into an empathetic response at that point, because it's almost like we go into correction, like, "Oh, nobody's feeling bad for you." And let's just be clear, empathy isn't feeling bad. Dr. Goldstein didn't feel bad for me, and that was it. Dr. Goldstein saw me in that moment and wanted me to understand that he understood what I was experiencing, and he held space for me. That was how he made me feel seen. So with our kids, when they do something, we can always start with, "I know it's really hard when you don't hear the answer you want. I know it's so hard when plans don't work out the way we want. I know you're really disappointed right now that I said no when you hoped I said yes." We can understand what it feels like when things don't go our way. We know that feeling. Now, let's implement what I'm describing here, which is the beauty and the benefit of storytelling. And where this comes in is not in the dysregulatory moment, not in the moment when we're struggling or when our child is struggling, because their sensory system is too taxed. We can't do it right then. We can practice empathy. We can just hold our space, stay very regulated, not adjust our boundary. We can do one brief statement of empathy and help them feel seen in that moment. I get it. It's frustrating. That's okay. That's all fine. But the storytelling aspect is so important for later, right? So that's something where it's like you could say something. And I remember doing this with my kids one time and saying like, can't remember, like, I'll think of an example that like comes to mind quickly, but I remember like, let's say junk food. Like I couldn't eat junk food a lot when I was younger. And like most kids, you want the junky cereal and whatever. And I remember going to other people's houses and they would be allowed, like they would have Frosted Flakes and Lucky Charms. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are allowed to eat this. This is amazing. And so I was telling my son one time, who was like wanting some kind of he's my sweet tooth kiddo out of the two. And he was younger and he wanted something. And I was like, "We can't have that. It's too much." Or, "We've already had a treat today. We can't have another one." And he was, it hit him wrong in that moment. And he was really unhappy about it. And once he settled down and sort of was able to get calm, I said, "I get it." I said, "Because do you want to know what? Bibi and Papa, those are my parents." And that's what he calls them. I said, "They didn't let me ever have these types of junky foods around and things like that. And when I'd go to this cousin's house and that cousin's house and I saw that they could have it, I was like floored. I couldn't believe it. And I used to just always get so irritated that they always said no. And didn't matter how many times I asked. But I get it now. And one day you'll get it too. But I get how you're feeling. Like, oh, it's so frustrating. I get that." And just even in sharing that story with him, I saw his entire little body soften. And he was like, oh my gosh, like you had a life before me and you know some of these experiences. The same is true for homework. Like homework's another good example. I remember one time, I was working with another family who was having a lot of different homework battles. And I did this when my kids were younger too, when they would say, I hate homework, I wish I didn't have to do it, I can't stand it, whatever, this is too hard, whatever the complaint of the day was. I used to that used to trigger in me sort of a more fear-based response of like, uh-oh, they're not going to do good in school. Uh-oh, they're not going to have a strong work ethic. They're going to be complainers. These are like all things that went against who I was in terms of like being the daughter of immigrant parents who like worked to the bone and taught you to do the same thing and all the things we sort of pride ourselves on. And so I would have a big reaction to those statements and I would say things like, no, 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 you're doing your homework. You're very lucky that you get to have this opportunity and homework is just part of it, and like really got very sort of lectury and corrective on it. And then one day I was like, who would want to hear that back? Like that is not comforting. It's not helpful. It's like this dynamic keeps happening. It just keeps repeating itself. So again, if you guys have listened to other episodes, I talk a lot about this idea of like, what are the patterns and where can we disrupt them? Once you see something as a predictable pattern, what can you change in the pattern? And really we can only change the way we react or how we've set something up. So then my son says something to complain about homework. And I said to him, I know I hated homework when I was a kid, like really, really bad. In fact, I used to say, I wish I could just have a job because at least at your job, you just go to your job and you come home and you don't have to think about it when you get home. School's different. You have to bring it home and you still don't get a break even once you're home. And when I said that, his eyes were like the size of saucers. He's like, I feel that way too. And I was like, a lot of people feel that way. Like school can feel tiring because it feels like, when do we get to turn it off? Right? Like, I get it. And we just sat in quiet for a minute and he felt seen. He felt like I understood him in that moment. So then I said to him, I said, look, I get how you're feeling. It doesn't change the fact though that like we still have to do it, just like I had to still do it when I was a kid. So what would feel better? Would it feel better to come home from school and like let loose and play for a while and then do it? Or would it feel better to like just knock it out and get it out of the way? And then at least you have the rest of the night free. And then you can have that feeling of like, it's done. And now I get to be completely at ease. And he was like, yeah, let's do it right away. That would be better. And so it's not like I hadn't said that before. I mean, I had said before, like, well, do you want to do it now or later? But see the difference in the tone? Do you see how, like, even saying it that way, so like, ugh? But when I approached it and I weaved in my own story, and it was a true story, by the way, I vividly remember saying that to my parents. I vividly remember feeling and thinking, man, if you work, you get home from work, you're not like still doing work at home, or at least that's not how I saw it? And then it's like, why do you have to go to school all day and then you come home and you still have to study or you still have to do an assignment or whatever the case is? So I connected with him in that moment and he felt it. And because he felt seen in that moment, going toward a solution is a lot easier, right? Because it's never like he didn't do the homework. It was just always a battle that was unnecessary. And guess what happened? The minute I started to do more storytelling with my kids, the minute I started to pull in personal experiences where I could help connect the dots, they stopped complaining about homework and other things. And it doesn't always have to be a story from your childhood. If they say something about feeling frustrated, think about where in your work context that's coming up. And I promise you, the minute you start to share it, they're going to be so curious. They're going to be like, wait, what did your boss say? Well, what did you say? Well, then what did the coworkers say? Like, you're going to be like storytelling, 101. You're going to be able to pull from all these different experiences because that's the thing that helps us feel seen. It's the same in our personal lives and in all of our relationships. When we feel seen, we feel safe. And that day with Dr. Goldstein, when he took that time to share that story with me, not only did I feel seen, I felt safe to continue. I was at ease. And the rest of the conversation flowed so easily and so beautifully. And I got back into that space where I could just be in the conversation and present. And it felt so good to hear all the input he was sharing. And I knew how much it was going to support people. It was supporting me in that moment. So what I'd like you to take away from this is, whenever you can, don't underestimate the power of helping someone in your life feel seen. And using story, your own personal story, your own personal shares to do that for somebody is so much more powerful than just a statement of empathy, because that is the thing that connects us. That is the thing that makes all humans see each other. I always say if people could, when you look at all of the conflict in the world and the the sadness, the places where we're so disconnected, I honestly believe it's because people are not feeling seen, seen in their stories, seen in their pain, seen in their struggle. And the less seen we feel, guess what happens? The more we have to fight, is what we tell ourselves. So if I don't feel seen, what do? I have to get louder. I have to get bolder. I have to go more outside of my values. I have to do this. I have to do that. No, we have to go back in and we have to, if what I'm seeking is to feel seen, how can I do that for another? That is reciprocity. Where in my life am I not seeing somebody else? Because if that's the thing I need, then where am I giving that thing? So it is, to me, at my core, one of the most important values we can hold beyond learning how to regulate our emotions, understanding the power of what it means to help someone feel seen is an incredible, incredible trait, quality. And my hope is that this space here is another space where you can come to, and maybe when you're done listening, you'll go, I think she sees me. It is my favorite thing on social media when people leave a comment and say, are you in my home right now? It's like you literally described me to a T. I'm not obviously in your home, but I want you to know it happens, not just to you. That's what Dr. Goldstein was saying to me. This happens. Things happen, right? And that's what I want parents to know. And that's what I want my life coaching clients to know. Every time, most of what I work on in life coaching is shifting patterns that keep us stuck, shifting patterns that keep us in fear-based thinking, shifting patterns so we can make a transition in our life, shifting patterns so we can transform something that is typically a challenge into a moment of opportunity, growth, and evolution. And the only way I do that is because I want them to feel seen, because what they're experiencing is part of what it means to live and to have a deep desire to express your life in a full way. And that is not an isolated experience. We are all feeling that. So again, if you hear nothing else in this solo episode, please take this away. Be a Dr. Goldstein to somebody in your life the same way he was to me that day. I have held that story with me. I'm excited to share it here, and I hope it resonated with you as much as, how deeply I felt it in that moment. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for being here. It means the absolute world to me. And until next time.